The dust swirled around Abigail Foster's boots as she stood before the weathered ranch house, clutching her small valise with white-knuckled fingers. The year was 1878, and the unforgiving Montana Territory had already claimed her family, leaving her with nothing but determination and the skill of her hands to forge a future. "Mr. Carson," she called out, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun, "I've come about the position." The creak of the porch boards announced his presence before she saw him. Jack Carson stepped into view, his tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but she could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 or so, with broad shoulders and a stance that spoke of a man who worked his land with his own hands. "Miss Foster," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Didn't expect you till tomorrow." "The stage arrived early," she explained, shifting her weight. Her journey had been long, starting from Pennsylvania after her parents' passing had left her with mounting debts and few prospects. The advertisement seeking a housekeeper for a ranch outside of Copper Creek had been her salvation. "I hope it's not an inconvenience." Jack stepped down from the porch, taking her valise without asking. "No inconvenience at all, just surprised is all." He gestured toward the house. "Come on in." "You must be tired." Abigail followed him, noting how the wooden steps creaked beneath her weight. The ranch house was modest but solid, built to withstand the harsh Montana winters. Inside, however, it was clear that a woman's touch had been absent for some time. Dishes were stacked haphazardly, clothes draped over chairs, and a layer of dust covered most surfaces. "I apologize for the state of things," Jack said, setting her valise down. "Been managing on my own since my mother passed last winter." "I'm very sorry for your loss," Abigail said softly. "Thank you." His eyes, a deep blue that reminded her of summer skies, met hers briefly before looking away. "The position is straightforward. Cooking, cleaning, mending, keeping house, as the advertisement stated. Pay is $15 a month with room and board." Abigail nodded. It wasn't much, but it would allow her to save something. "That's acceptable, Mr. Carson." "Jack," he corrected. "Mr. Carson was my father." "Jack," she repeated, testing the name. "And I'm Abigail, though most call me Abby." He showed her to a small but tidy room off the kitchen. "My mother's sewing room. Converted it for you. Washroom's out back. We've got a pump in the kitchen for water." Abigail surveyed the space: a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the corral. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had in weeks. "I asked to keep house for a cowboy," she said, setting her bonnet on the bed. "But I should tell you, Mr. Carson, Jack, I'm a good worker. I can do more than sweep floors if needed." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "I'd rather you keep me." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. He immediately flushed. "That came out wrong. I meant I'd rather you keep me in line, keep me fed. My cooking's terrible, and this place has gone to ruin without someone to manage it properly." He cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's whenever you're ready to make it." With that, he disappeared, boots thudding against the wooden floor. Abigail sat on the edge of the bed, smiling despite herself. Jack Carson was nothing like she'd expected. Not the gruff, weathered cowboy she'd imagined, but a man with kind eyes and an awkward charm that had caught her off guard. That evening, she prepared a simple meal from the supplies she found in the pantry: beans, bacon, and cornbread. Jack entered the kitchen as she was setting the table, the scent of horses and leather following him. "Smells good," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Been a while since I've had a proper meal." "It's nothing special," she replied, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "Just making do with what was available." They ate mostly in silence, the ticking of the clock on the mantel the only sound beyond their utensils against the plates. Abigail took the opportunity to study her employer more closely. His hands were calloused and strong, his face tanned from long hours in the sun. A small scar ran along his jawline, and she found herself wondering about its origin. "Tomorrow I'll show you around the ranch," Jack said, breaking the silence. "It's not much, but it's mine. 200 acres, 40 head of cattle, 6 horses. How long have you been here?" she asked. "My father built this place 20 years ago. I was 10 when we settled here. He died 5 years back. Been running it on my own since, with Ma helping until last winter." A shadow crossed his face. "Influenza took her. Doctor couldn't get here in time." Abigail nodded sympathetically. "I lost my parents 6 months ago. Consumption." Their eyes met across the table, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. "It's not easy being alone," Jack said quietly. "No," she agreed. "It's not." The next day, Jack showed her around the ranch as promised. The land stretched out before them, a vast expanse of grassland bordered by distant mountains. He pointed out the barn, the corral, the small creek that ran through the property, and the pastures where his cattle grazed. "It's beautiful," Abigail said honestly, taking in the wild grandeur of it all. "It is," Jack agreed. "Though it can be unforgiving. Winters are harsh, summers can be dry, takes grit to make it out here." "I have grit," she assured him. "More than you might think." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and nodded. "I believe you do, Miss Foster." Over the following weeks, Abigail fell into a routine. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent the mornings cleaning and the afternoons baking or mending. By the end of her first month, the ranch house had been transformed. Floors gleamed, windows sparkled, and fresh curtains hung in every room. Jack noticed. He commented on the changes with a quiet appreciation that warmed her more than it should have. Their meals together had become less silent, filled instead with conversation about the day's work, news from town, or stories from their pasts. She learned that Jack had once dreamed of being a doctor, but his father's death had anchored him to the ranch. He learned that Abigail had been engaged once, to a banker's son who'd abandoned her when her family's fortunes turned. "His loss," Jack had said simply, making her blush to the roots of her hair. One evening in late summer, a thunderstorm rolled in. Abigail was in the kitchen, kneading dough for the next day's bread, when a particularly loud crash of thunder made her jump. The door burst open and Jack entered, soaked to the skin. "Storm caught me checking the north fence," he explained, dripping onto the floor. "Sorry about the mess." "You'll catch your death," she scolded, hurrying to fetch a towel. "Here, dry off while I make some coffee." As she moved about the kitchen, she was acutely aware of him watching her. When she turned to hand him the steaming mug, she found him standing closer than she'd expected, his eyes intent on her face. "You've changed this place, Abby," he said softly. "Changed it for the better." "I've just tidied up a bit," she demurred. "Not just the house." His voice was low. "Everything's different since you came." The air between them seemed to crackle with the same electricity that lit up the sky outside. For a moment, she thought he might step closer, might do something to acknowledge the tension that had been building between them for weeks. Instead, he took the coffee and stepped back. "Thank you for this. I should get changed." Abigail nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that settled in her chest. That night, lying in her bed listening to the rain, she admitted to herself what she'd been trying to deny. She was falling in love with Jack Carson. The realization was terrifying. She'd come to Montana to secure her independence, not to lose her heart to a cowboy with kind eyes and gentle hands. She'd had her heart broken once before, and the scars were still tender. The next morning, Jack announced he needed to go into town for supplies. "Should be back by supper," he told her. "Don't wait up if I'm late." Abigail spent the day cleaning with more vigor than usual, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Jack. She was up to her elbows in soapy water when she heard horses approaching. Looking out the window, she saw not Jack's familiar figure, but three men she didn't recognize. Something about their demeanor set her on edge. They dismounted with a swagger that spoke of trouble. Wiping her hands on her apron, she reached for the shotgun Jack kept by the door and stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she called, keeping the gun visible but not raised. The leader, a sallow-faced man with a pockmarked complexion, grinned unpleasantly. Well, Carson's got himself a pretty little housekeeper." "Mr. Carson isn't here," she said firmly, "and I'd appreciate it if you'd state your business or move along." The man laughed. "Hear that, boys?" "She'd appreciate it." He turned his attention back to Abigail. "Name's Harlan Doyle. Your boss and I have unfinished business." "He'll be back soon," she lied. "You can talk to him then." Doyle's eyes narrowed. "I don't believe you, miss." "Way I see it, Carson's left his pretty little housekeeper all alone. Might be a good opportunity to teach him a lesson about refusing to sell to the right people." Abigail raised the shotgun. "I may look like just a housekeeper, Mr. Doyle, but I know how to use this. Now get back on your horses and leave." For a tense moment she thought they might rush her, then Doyle shrugged. "Another time, then. Tell Carson we'll be back." As they rode away, Abigail's hands began to shake. She lowered the shotgun, heart pounding. When Jack returned that evening, she told him about the visitors. His face darkened. "Doyle works for a man named Edward Sullivan. Sullivan's been buying up ranches all around here, wants to build an empire." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've refused to sell, and he doesn't like being told no." "Are they dangerous?" she asked. "They can be," he admitted. "But don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you." The protective note in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm not afraid," she said, though it wasn't entirely true, "but perhaps you should consider their offer." Jack shook his head firmly. "This land is my legacy. My father's blood and sweat are in this soil. I won't sell, not for any price." His determination should have reassured her, but instead it filled her with dread. Men like Sullivan and Doyle didn't strike her as the type to take no for an answer. Her fears proved justified 2 nights later when they were awoken by the smell of smoke. Jack burst into her room. "Fire! The barn's on fire!" They rushed outside to find the barn engulfed in flames. Jack immediately ran toward it. "The horses!" "Jack, no," she cried, but he was already disappearing into the inferno. Abigail grabbed buckets and began ferrying water from the pump, though she knew it was futile. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. Just when she was certain Jack had been lost, he emerged, leading 2 panicked horses. His face was streaked with soot, his shirt singed. "The others?" she asked, knowing the answer. He shook his head grimly. "Couldn't get to them." They worked through the night to contain the blaze, but by dawn the barn was nothing but smoldering ruins. Jack stood amid the ashes, his expression desolate. "It was Doyle," he said, voice hard. "Had to be." "You can't know that for certain," Abigail cautioned, though she believed it too. "I know." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "Abby, you should leave, go back east. This is going to get worse before it gets better." She straightened her spine. "I'm not going anywhere, Jack Carson. You hired me to keep house, and that's what I intend to do. This isn't your fight." "Maybe not," she conceded. "But I've run from trouble before, and it solved nothing. I won't run again." His expression softened, and for a moment she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he nodded. "We'll rebuild. Start with the fence on the north side tomorrow. Can't afford to lose any cattle." The following days were filled with backbreaking work. Jack spent from dawn to dusk repairing fences, while Abigail took on more of the ranch chores in addition to her household duties. They were both exhausted, falling into bed each night with aching muscles and heavy hearts. A week after the fire, Jack rode into town to file a report with the sheriff. He returned looking grim. "Sheriff says there's no proof it was arson," he reported. "Could have been lightning, a dropped lantern, anything." "But we know the truth," Abigail said. "We do." He paced the kitchen. "Sullivan's in town. Sheriff says he's been asking about me, about the ranch." Abigail felt a chill. "What are you going to do?" "Stand my ground," Jack said simply. "It's all I can do." That night, Abigail couldn't sleep. The moon was full, casting silver light through her window. She rose and went to the kitchen for a glass of water, only to find Jack sitting at the table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey before him. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He looked up, eyes haunted. "Keep thinking about those horses. They trusted me to protect them." She sat across from him. "It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I knew Sullivan was dangerous, should have sold when I had the chance. And give up your father's legacy, the land you love." She shook her head. "That's not who you are, Jack." He studied her face in the moonlight. "How do you know who I am?" "You've only been here 3 months." "I know enough," she said simply. "I know you're a good man. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you talk to your horses and name the calves you know you'll eventually sell." A small smile touched his lips. "Been watching me, have you?" "Yes," she admitted, bolder in the darkness than she'd be in daylight. "I have." The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken words. Finally, Jack reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm glad you're here, Abby," he said softly. "Don't know what I'd do without you now." "You'd manage," she said, though her heart was racing. "You managed before I came. Didn't really live, though, just existed." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You brought life back to this place, back to me." Their eyes met, and Abigail felt herself leaning forward. Jack did the same until their faces were inches apart. His breath smelled of whiskey and coffee, a strangely comforting combination. "I should go back to bed," she whispered, not moving. "You should," he agreed, also unmoving. Then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then more insistent. Abigail responded with a passion that surprised her, her hands finding their way to his hair. He pulled her onto his lap, his arms encircling her waist. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first day you arrived." "Why didn't you?" she asked. "Didn't think you'd want a rough cowboy like me." His voice was vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. She touched his face, tracing the scar on his jawline. "I've wanted you to do that for almost as long." He kissed her again, deeper this time. Then he stood, lifting her in his arms. "Abby Foster, I'm falling in love with you." Her heart soared. "I'm already there, Jack Carson." He carried her to his bedroom, laying her gently on the bed. They made love slowly, tenderly, discovering each other in the silver moonlight. Afterwards, she lay in his arms, feeling truly at peace for the first time since her parents' deaths. "Marry me," Jack whispered into her hair. She raised herself on one elbow to look at him. "Are you sure?" "It's been such a short time." "Never been more sure of anything," he said, eyes serious. "Life out here is uncertain, Abby. The fire proved that. I don't want to waste what time we have." She kissed him softly. "Yes, I'll marry you." They fell asleep tangled together, dreams of a shared future filling their minds. The next morning, Jack rode into town to speak with the preacher about arrangements for their wedding. Abigail hummed as she went about her chores, happiness making her steps light despite her exhaustion from the night before. She was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. Her first thought was that Jack had returned early, but as the riders came into view, her blood ran cold. Doyle had returned, this time with 5 men. Abigail rushed inside for the shotgun, but before she could reach it, the door burst open. Doyle stood there, a sneer on his face. All alone again, Miss Foster, he taunted. Carson really should know better. Get out of this house, she demanded, backing away. Not until I deliver a message. He stalked toward her. Sullivan's patience is wearing thin. He wants this land and he's going to get it one way or another. This land isn't for sale, she said, chin raised. Not now, not ever. Doyle laughed. Loyal little thing, aren't you? Wonder if Carson knows what a gem he's got. He reached out to touch her face, but Abigail slapped his hand away. His expression darkened. That wasn't smart, miss. Neither was coming here, said a cold voice from the doorway. Jack stood there, rifle raised, eyes hard as flint. Behind him, Abigail could see the sheriff and 2 deputies. Step away from her, Doyle, Jack commanded. Now, Doyle's hand moved toward his gun, but the sheriff's voice stopped him. I wouldn't if I were you. You're already facing charges of trespassing and intimidation. Don't add attempted murder to the list. For a tense moment, Doyle seemed to consider his options. Then, slowly, he raised his hands. This isn't over, Carson. Actually, it is, the sheriff said, stepping forward to handcuff Doyle. Sullivan's been arrested in town. Seems he's wanted for fraud in Colorado. His whole operation's coming down. As the deputies led Doyle and his men away, Jack rushed to Abigail's side. Are you all right? Did they hurt you? She shook her head, suddenly trembling with delayed fear. No, I'm fine. Just shaken. Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I should never have left you alone. You couldn't have known they'd come back so soon, she soothed him. And you came back just in time. The sheriff cleared his throat. Got suspicious when I saw Sullivan's men leaving town right after you, Carson. Figured I'd better follow, just in case. I'm grateful you did, Sheriff, Jack said, still holding Abigail close. Well, I'll leave you folks be. Stop by the office tomorrow to give a statement. With a tip of his hat, the sheriff departed. Alone again, Jack led Abigail to the sofa. When I saw Doyle standing over you, I nearly lost my mind. I was scared, she admitted. Not for myself, but for you. I was afraid you'd get hurt trying to protect me. He touched her face gently. I'll always try to protect you, Abby. That's what people do when they love someone. And I'll always stand by your side, she promised. That's what people do when they are in love. He smiled, that dimple appearing in his cheek. The preacher can marry us next Sunday. Is that too soon? Not soon enough, she replied, kissing him softly. They were married in the small church in Copper Creek, with half the town in attendance. Abigail wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Jack looked handsome in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her face as they spoke their vows. I, Jack, take you, Abigail, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. When Abigail repeated the words, her heart felt so full it might burst. This man, this land, they had become her home, her future, in a way she'd never dared to dream. After the ceremony, they celebrated at the ranch, where neighbors and friends gathered to wish them well. As the sun set, casting golden light across the land, Jack pulled her aside. Happy, Mrs. Carson? He asked, arms around her waist. Happier than I've ever been, she answered truthfully. Good. He kissed her forehead. Because I have a surprise for you. He led her to what remained of the burned barn. But instead of ruins, she saw the beginnings of a new structure, foundation laid, frame partially erected. I've been working on it whenever I could, he explained. With help from some of the neighbors, should be finished before winter. It's wonderful, Jack, she said, touched by his determination to rebuild. That's not the surprise. He guided her to the far corner, where a small building stood separate from the main barn. This is for you. Inside was a bright, airy space with large windows and shelves along the walls. A table stood in the center, and in the corner was a small stove. "Your own space," Jack explained. "For sewing, reading, whatever you want. You asked to keep house for a cowboy, and you've done that brilliantly. But you're more than a housekeeper now, Abby. You're my wife, my partner. This ranch is as much yours as it is mine." Tears filled her eyes. "Jack, it's perfect. You deserve it," he said simply. "You've brought so much joy into my life." As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Abigail knew she had found what she'd been searching for all along, not just security or independence, but love, deep and abiding. 5 years later, Abigail stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching as Jack taught their 4-year-old son, Joseph, to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Emma, played at her feet while the baby inside her kicked energetically. The Carson ranch had prospered. With Sullivan gone, the threats had ceased. They'd increased their herd, built a new barn, and added 2 rooms to the house. Jack had even hired a ranch hand to help with the heavier work, giving him more time with his growing family. "Mama, look," Joseph called, his face alight with pride as he guided the pony in a circle. "I see you, sweetheart. You're doing wonderfully," she called back, heart swelling with love. Jack looked up at her, his smile as warm as the day they'd met. The years had added a few lines to his face, a touch of silver at his temples, but his eyes still held the same tenderness when they looked at her. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate young woman with nothing but the clothes on her back to the mistress of a thriving ranch, wife to a man she adored, mother to beautiful children, Jack joined her on the porch, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Carson." "I was just thinking about how fortunate I am," she said, leaning into his embrace. "How one advertisement in a newspaper changed my entire life." He chuckled. "Best decision I ever made, placing that ad. And the best decision I ever made was answering it," she replied. "Even if I only asked to keep house for a cowboy." Jack's eyes twinkled with the memory. "And I said I'd rather you keep me." "You got your wish," she said, smiling up at him. "I'm keeping you forever, Jack Carson." "Forever sounds just about right," he murmured, bending to kiss her as the first stars appeared in the Montana sky.